All right, we're in the final stretch here. Maria, more than anything, I want you to introduce and welcome you to a room full of workforce development nerds.
Awesome. My favorite
Yeah, absolutely,
type of room.
absolutely. I say it because, you know, folks can see the bio, and I know you've left quite a wake of successes in an amazing career in the civic space. Affordable housing, economic development, civic infrastructure, leadership at the highest levels of city government, but workforce development was not, you weren't in direct workforce development coming up. That was not something that you spent direct time in. So what I'd love to start with is just a little, I'd love to hear a little bit about where and how you were introduced to workforce. When did you see a project or an effort that you're like, I get it, I understand what this is, I understand what we're trying to do here?
So first of all, it's always great to be with all of you at this particular convening. I was just speaking with someone outside, and he works at Strive, an amazing program. That was actually, that was early on in the Bloomberg administration, probably the first time I had direct exposure to a workforce program and what that meant for the work we were trying to do in building pipelines for construction. But on the specific question, and I think it's interesting, I didn't start in workforce development, and I haven't been a service provider, but I have, over the course of my time across these different policy issues, have come to see the through line, actually, in all of that, is workforce development. It's really a question of opportunity, whether you're building homes or trying to create jobs or revitalizing neighborhoods. None of that really matters unless you create opportunity for people. And I've learned a lot from all of you, and it's been so fantastic to be part of this community in learning what is good and what can be better. And in particular, I'll just name two things that I've seen and reflected on over the course of a couple of decades of being kind of in the orbit of this work. One is that workforce development is really not a standalone policy issue or program. It is the connective tissue across a lot of policy domains that we work in. The second thing is that it's not just an economic imperative. You know, for me, Darren, this has also been a moral imperative. And I say that because I didn't grow up in a family where we talked about economic development or workforce development. But you know what I did see? I saw what it meant for my parents to navigate jobs that were essential but were undervalued. Yeah. And I saw what it meant when the systems opened doors and when they shut it. And so I've tried to work in this city with so many of the people in this room and outside, building a city that works better for families like mine. Yeah,
I love that. And I love the perspective, because we've talked a lot about it today. And in the sector, we talk a lot about how multifaceted workforce development is. And so I love that as a jumping off point to another thing that I think we've been trying to explore in this room today in this sector for years, which is most of the folks in this room, most of the folks watching us, most of the folks in this space feel deep passion and experience with seeing workforce development as transformational for individuals, for families, for communities, for just our whole economy. And yet we can't seem to get traction for real substantive investment, sustained investment, organized investment. And I feel like there are a couple reasons or potential theories. One is it is already in so many aspects of what we're doing in civic life, in our K through 12 system, in our post-secondary system, in what we're doing, in what HRA is doing, in what SBS and WIOA dollars are doing, that it's so diffused, it's hard to get a handle on it. That's one idea. Two, we want a big system, but we're already kind of down the road and it's hard to reshape it. But I'm not gonna lay them all out. I'm curious your sense of what our challenges have been getting real, sustained, substantive investment in something that, as you said, seems to be a part of so many aspects of our civic life.
Well, first, I wanna say, and I get that there are challenges, we could all be doing more, But I think it's also important to know and to acknowledge that you're already doing incredible work. The constellation of leaders in organizations in this room have made great progress. And I think too often, because things are complicated, and I think too often success is measured by, well, what % of the city's budget goes to this thing? And that might be too blunt of an instrument to use in determining success. I've been in a number of conversations where we talk a lot about what does it mean for the system to work. So I think that's one challenge. How do we think about a system that works? And the holy grail has always been, can we have a unified system that's well functioning? I think a potential challenge here is that imagining just one system may be a mistake. And the better way to think about it, perhaps, is that this is really systems within systems. And so whether that's the sectoral systems or borough systems or employer-led systems, how do we strengthen those and at the same time also nurture the connective tissue, whether those are issues of data infrastructure, accountability, et cetera. I also think that being very wide-eyed about where the system is failing, whether they're systems or a large one, is part of our collective challenge. And what I've seen is, while there's been tremendous progress in developing workforce development, in pairing it in a more meaningful way with economic development, there are still places where there is extraordinary need and room for aspiration. The first, of course, is in my mind, is with handoffs. So when we think about whether it's K through 12 to CUNY, employers and service providers, where do people fall through the cracks? How do we make sure that what is a very fragmented system in the world of budgets and different jurisdictions, and where New Yorkers feel the cost every day of that fragmentation, where we try to overcome it? So I think that's one area. The other area where I think the system still needs a lot of work is recognizing, as many of you do, of course, the friction in people's lives. We spend a lot of time thinking about, does the content of this training make sense? Is it as excellent as it can be? And yet, what is happening in people's lives on housing, on childcare, on transportation, are likely more determinative of how successful they are, right, than the content of that training. So those are areas that we still need to grapple with, but improving it is, in my mind, a matter of really understanding what truly are the systems that need to be strengthened, and here's the part that is, I think, particularly important, what does it mean to do it as a coalition? I'd like to think that politics and public policy in this city is a meritocracy of ideas, but that would probably be naive. Yeah. The best ideas don't always win. But you know what does? Well-organized coalitions. And so what this room needs to do and continue to do in bringing talent developers, service providers, labor, employers, and government together, not just to strengthen or to fund good programs, but bring them together towards shared labor market goals, might be a way to think about what's the moonshot.
There's like 5 different things I want to unpack in that. But let's start from the first piece, because I think it bears a conversation. There have been, I mean, no less than a dozen reports issued in the last 10 or 20 years from CUF, from ETC, from Jobs First, you go down the list, from the city itself, about the idea of the system you just described, about the idea of this citywide ecosystem, maybe broken up by sector, but generally a system where employers are informing education systems about what they're looking for. Those education systems are working with New Yorkers to train, to prepare, to educate for those jobs. Nonprofits and government are helping provide connective tissue and helping serve that meaty middle and edge cases as they need. And that there's sort of this system feeding itself and supporting employers, supporting individuals, and so forth. That is a complicated affair in a small town or a small city let alone something of our size. So just starting at that point, is your sense that that's maybe too ambitious a goal for us to shoot for right now, and that we should be looking for smaller pieces? Or is that still kind of a holy grail to hold out?
I think the city might be too complicated to think about as just one gigantic system.
Yeah.
And it might be that this sort of system of systems framework is it foots more with reality. I don't think it makes it any less hard. And I don't think that the outcomes would be any less ambitious. And that it still requires, even if it's not one big, well-coordinated system, it still requires, I think, the right type of advocacy to get that to work, because we're still, I think, too often needing to justify the need to build the system, right? And so much of at least economic development still gets measured on what gets built versus like physically built, versus what might be the invisible plumbing that actually connects people to opportunity.
And on the point of plumbing, I think the question that a lot of us struggle with is it time to rip out the plumbing and install new plumbing, new funding, new pathways, or do we just need to keep changing the fixtures and deal with the plumbing we got?
Well, that's a great question, and I'm going to cheat a little bit. I mean, it's kind of like the work of government. You have an incoming administration that needs to do three things at once: build a government, run a government, and change a government. And I think that the work on policy issues, in many ways, it's the same thing. You have to operate in those three gears. What helps, I'll compare it to housing. The work that I felt so fortunate to be part of a lot of really amazing work with colleagues across many agencies, and it was this moonshot goal of 500,000 new homes over the course of a decade. City of Yes, everyone said was impossible. And I've asked my friends and closest allies in workforce, what is that moonshot? And I want to be reductive about it. Maybe it doesn't lend itself to a unit count. But the articulating a vision and a goal is critically important. Marshaling everyone people who are not workforce development people, they're not workforce development nerds, on that mission, really critical. But let's also be realistic that, much like with housing, you could say you're going to build 1 million homes over the course of the decade. People are facing housing insecurity today. So what are we doing about it, right? And it's the same thing with the workforce programs. Yeah. People need to connect to opportunity today.
Yeah, well, and I was going to push back a little bit on your point about funding, because I think affordable housing is a terrific point. Like, you can look at Maslow's hierarchy, and we all need that kind of safe, secure environment to build everything from. So I completely understand the intense focus administration after administration puts on affordable housing. But you see an investment in dollars behind that. An idea that is transformational. And just to the point of workforce, I think those who do and can look at the outcomes they're seeing for their neighbors and New Yorkers in need, and New Yorkers that aren't in traditional need, they just need and want an education system that gets them to a good job. And we're not seeing that type of focus like a laser, big swing, moonshot investments in workforce. And that's where I feel like, as a sector, it's remarkable how many workforce providers. Let me take a step back. I run a social service organization that is multi-service settlement house. Most of my programs, I'm getting 80% funding from government, and I'm trying to find the 15, 20% to bridge. Philanthropy, fee-for-service, whatever that is. In workforce, maybe a third of my programming is supported by government, and the rest we're hustling for. Leslie from Hot Bread Kitchen made a similar point, 17% of her budget. I was blown away to hear that. So I'm curious if you see an opportunity or a need to really pour new, different money into that, or is it the fact that we're throwing billions in our K-12 education system? And if that worked a little bit better, we would have a better workforce pipeline, or 2-year, 4-year CUNY, SUNY systems.
Yeah. I think it's probably still all of the above.
Yeah.
Where all of the upstream investments that we have to make in order to afford people the type of opportunity that they deserve in this city. All of that needs to happen. And then the question continues to be, how do you articulate what the resource need is from government, from philanthropy, and the last session was about that, in ways that are not just compelling, but are as outcomes focused as you want them to be. And part of it is, everyone in this room knows this, but do we have to reinvent the wheel each time? Mm-hmm. I'm sure we don't.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of this is about scaling. I'm sure a lot of this is about resourcing that invisible plumbing that we talked about before, and bringing in kind of new partners, because even if it was 4 times that government funding or city government funding was 4 times what it is today, the need is so great that too has to be part of the mission.
Perfect, and you're making my job easy, because the other thing I wanted to pull out of the some comments you made before is around the idea of advocacy, and you know, as noted, I think we're a sector that feels like we are getting notable outcomes for the things we're doing, and I'm curious from the perches I can't even imagine how many workforce development type programs have been pitched your way at various spots along the way that someone's sort of propped up. And is there something that you can suggest from your time in these spaces, by the way, on philanthropy, in government, along the way, that we should be doing better at? Should we be doing better storytelling? Should we be doing better data collection to present it? Because again, to the point about affordable housing and the rest of it, it's remarkable to me that more folks in elected office and high-ranking policy positions, I think they think about workforce as an afterthought and not as a catalyst for so much good. So I'm curious, when that lands with you.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. The aspiration has always been, or it needs to continue to be, to make sure that workforce development, talent development isn't just bolted onto economic development,
and by the way,
it's kind of the engine that runs it.
Yeah,
right?
and by the way, is workforce development itself, is the name itself. I was talking to Lorraine Cortez Vasquez about older adult services, and like, we need a name change, we need a marketing change. Right. And like, what is workforce development? To exactly what you said, it's education, it's training, it's preparation, it's these things. And
you know, we did a little change, right? We called it talent.
Yeah, well, that's when you said that word, I was like,
more people focused. I think there's just, the reality is there is, unlike with housing, it's HPD, it's NYCHA, right? Those are the main agencies. If you want to increase their funding with capital to turn a 20,000 production goal in a year, you double that, you deal with them. It's obviously a very fragmented system.
Yeah.
A lot of agencies have workforce programs. Mm-hmm. Every agency has its own kind of core mission, let alone its own procurement process, its own way of determining metrics, its own way of understanding success. There have been really important strides, of course. In the Adams administration, we convened an interagency cabinet of folks who work on workforce and started the work of really shared metrics, but it has a long way to go. So the first thing is to recognize that there are many doors, much like with job seekers. There are too many doors, and you want to make sure that there's no kind of wrong first door or front door. The second, I'm sure, is in storytelling, but it's not just a matter of branding, it's what does work. How do we have a unified vision that people can get behind versus their kind of pet project or the thing that they feel closest to because they've seen it, they've seen the participants and the successes. And what do those models look like, and how do we once and for all truly dramatically scale the ones that are most successful?
I'm not going to name which elected official, but in state government, city council, mayor's offices, I've confronted a couple elected officials who really didn't believe that workforce development got to notable outcomes. They thought it was helpful, they thought it was nice. And that's where, when in my mind's eye, when I think about the work we have ahead of us, I'm just curious if that's something that you
You
think
know,
is...
I think it maybe goes back to the point I made earlier about the friction in people's lives. When you build a unit of affordable housing and you give someone the keys, people then can't say, well, was it really this home that provided security for this person? It obviously is. But a workforce program, even the most successful one, has to exist and kind of be in a world that realizes the realities of a person's life. And so maybe there's still not just storytelling, there's work to do to make sure that that program is successful, but that we're also, as a city and as a constellation of service providers across different policy areas, also being as thoughtful as we need to be about housing and transportation and childcare, so they don't have that excuse. They can't say, well, this didn't actually transform someone's life.
Yeah. Well, and I think if the expectation is that the minute someone comes out of a 12-week, 14-week, half-year program, that's going to be life-altering. Right? I mean, if that's the expectation, then yes, this is a life's journey that we're trying to support, and I think hit somewhere along the way. I want to pivot a little bit, pull the lens back, because most of our workforce providers are also part of the nonprofit ecosystem. And to your point about advocacy, hat tip to HSA and HSC and folks like Maria Lizardo and who are really galvanizing the sector to be seen and stand up for itself. But I often think about folks who have spent any time around Andrew Roche used to use a term 20 years ago that technology used to be a slice of the pie, and now it's the whole pan. And I would suggest that nonprofits are thought of as let's fund a slice of the pie. And when I'm looking at agendas of moving and helping New Yorkers, we're the pan. We are in everything that most elected officials want to do around social mobility, around fixing income inequality, or, by the way, around housing, around all of these things. And yet I feel like we don't get pulled in and recognized as a sector, and whether that's workforce development, whether that's mental health, whatever that might be. I'm curious, and if you can share any insights around that, because I know the nonprofit sector is something that you've spent time supporting and advocating for as much as you can within this larger bureaucracy. But anything that we can take away as nonprofit leaders, providers, workers, that can help us as we try to elevate the profile of nonprofits as the real invisible hands working in our communities and on the ground.
I lament the fact that it feels that way for the sector, because so much of what government needs to do, what our city needs to do for different communities, absolutely relies on not-for-profit providers. And some of it, I know, it's just some of the basics need to get fixed. How not-for-profits get paid, the wages of the workforce, right? Those are just table stakes in many cases, and a lot of advocacy, too much advocacy, probably feels like it needs to happen in order to get the table stakes,
that's just
right?
the process stuff.
That's
I'm
just
talking about like an approach to like problem solving is through.
And but the table stake, but those basics are so critical, because the time to then, of course, be involved in strategizing and implementation and what's the moonshot and how do we fix the system, if the day-to-day is not strong, then of course everything else feels like a luxury. So there's clearly a lot to do. And it's not because there isn't a recognition of the role of not-for-profits. My colleagues and I, every time I've been in government, that recognition has been there, but it's clearly a time where recognition and awareness is not sufficient. That there needs to be the corollary action that demonstrates, that shows and doesn't just say that you're important. Because we have some monumental challenges in this city. And with the new administration, I think there's just a phenomenal opportunity, because there's such clarity of vision and purpose. It's about affordability. It's about economic mobility. That cannot happen without the support and leadership of the larger not-for-profit sector. And so this might be a particularly unique and important opportunity to not just get the basics right, but to actually set a better foundation for the type of strategy and visioning work on reinventing the entire thing, on changing the status quo, because we all know that the status quo rarely benefits those who are furthest from opportunity.
This is fun because you're not working in government. You've said that you're not going to come into this next administration, that you're helping it. So to be able to speak with a certain degree of candor about what was and wasn't happening, what can happen is helpful and appreciated. I'm curious, when you reflect back on a couple decades of work in city government, are there any projects left unfinished, or something that you wish you had pursued that just didn't have time for, didn't work out? Is there anything that stands out?
Oh, there's a long list. It's a lot. We were just joking outside that I think my tombstone is going to say, "She just ran out of time."
My team often gives me crap about the fact that we were joking about that we both came up in and around government, and you work with an urgency, that you're working with a shot clock, and there's, you put down a list of things you're trying to get to, and you can only get to so much.
Yeah, and I'll say, I mean, there certainly is a long list of projects, but the thing that I've been reflecting on a lot is actually this question of the plumbing. The plumbing of government, because policies come and go, agendas come and go with political cycles, but if we don't fix the plumbing of government, the contracting, how we hire, how we leverage technology, procurement, how we pay, then those initiatives, they become heroic acts to get universal pre-kindergarten done, heroic acts to get City of Yes done. And then then the system eventually might buckle. But if you fix the plumbing, then the next UPK, the next City of Yes, the next big project or initiative stands a better chance.
Yeah, and I'm curious, absolutely. And I'm curious along those lines, one of the things that we're all bearing witness to with this federal administration is the daring with which they go after their priorities and their wants. And I'm curious on that same point, I certainly feel like I came up through government and through systems where there were certainly bold sort of visions thrown down, but I don't think we were as bold and ambitious as we could have and should have been, given the change we need to support the New Yorkers around us that we see, just to create, an affordable, livable city. And I'm curious if you carry that maybe we were not, and I'm speaking broadly in government, universally as bold as we could have been through different things we were trying to do, or do you feel like government, was doing just fine?
I think it can always do more.
Yeah.
And I've marveled at the transformations that have happened, really tremendous work, because there were extraordinary public servants working with allies and partners outside of government who've gotten it done. And we live at a time, especially as we see the threats from the federal government, where even those efforts probably were not heroic enough. But here's the good news, I'm a pathological optimist, as much as this time is one of volatility and at times cruelty, I do believe that there is an other side to this that is a better a place of dignity and opportunity, and it's really folks like the ones who are in this room who can make sure that we get to that period, that we get to that place sooner rather than later. And I'm very hopeful, and it's not just because I'm helping with this particular transition, but I'm really hopeful, given the affordability agenda, that the workforce development practitioners and partners, it's really a very special opportunity to be part of that agenda. Because if we think about it, affordability isn't just about stabilizing the cost of living, right? It's about increasing earning power, and workforce development, talent development has that ability to do both, to stabilize people, to stabilize costs by stabilizing lives, and increasing earning power. So you're at a very unique place, and I hope it's something that you capitalize on.
That's great. So we have 5 minutes, and again, you're reading my hopes for getting to some questions, because you nailed what I wanted to talk a little bit about, and it's the transition that's happening in the administration coming in. First, kind of just real basic question, a human level. What in the Mamdani agenda excites you the most? Like, when you look at those big,
Sure.
what jumps out? And
two things. One, it's the focus on what people experience, believe, and understand. This gets a little bit to the conversation earlier about do we brand it this way or that way? So much of government, and I'm culpable in this, traffic in the language of policy and this RFP and that model and this framework. New Yorkers, we shouldn't bother them with that. They care about the home that we're either providing, the problem that we are fixing, the jobs that we are creating, and so that the focus not just on affordability and what matters to working people is refreshing and clarifying, and I think that will be clarifying for everyone in government. The second thing is this focus on public excellence and on fixing the broken systems. Now that is unglamorous, really painstaking work, but there is an opportunity there with the right types of partners to get it right, and to get it right for the larger ecosystem of all of the partners across policy domains, and of course, first and foremost, for New Yorkers who have probably gotten too used to a politics of a little bit of despair and cynicism, and focusing on all that doesn't work. So that I'm really impressed by, and I hope it continues.
There's not one of those. There's all sorts of bold. I mean, for me, it's the universal childcare. The idea of, if he can get that done years 2, year 3, year 4, whatever that is, that to me is amazing. I mean, I love the supermarkets and food deserts. I love the idea of lower cost transit, but like, is there one item that jumped out at you when as he started to come on the stage? Was there anything that grabbed your?
That for sure.
Yeah.
But the part of me that's like, if every agency head uses that analysis and that framework and thinks about what it means for everyday New Yorkers, the affordability that they're experiencing, and thinks about every tool and program that can help, that's what's transformative. Versus any particular program. For sure.
Staying on transition, I mean, a mayor has, what, 45 days to?
Less.
Yeah, I mean, which is an insane process to put together a leadership team of a $100 billion enterprise in that amount of time. I'm not gonna ask you too many details about where you are and the team are, but I am curious, what would you spot as the timeline that you think over the next weeks and months kind of makes sense for an administration and for all of us to be expecting and anticipating?
Yeah, well, they're running on all cylinders, on appointments of senior officials, on being prepared for day one, on what it looks like for the first 100 days, on preparing for emergencies, on ensuring that there are detailed implementation plans for the major commitments made. All of that is happening all day long. I don't think anyone there is really sleeping. And we're helping, of course, and really happy to as much as we can. And then day one happens, and transitions, it's easy to focus on between now and January 1st. But of course, the work of transition continues. Appointments in Bloomberg and de Blasio and Adams happen throughout the first quarter, some even to the second quarter. And so that's typical, and there has to be the right type of prioritization, because the entire ball game in my mind looks like this, to actually help lift up the lives of New Yorkers. What it means to have the right people in the right formation towards the right goals at the right pace. And so that is both art and science of governing, and I know that they're really committed to getting it right.
Got it, love it. Last 30 seconds, a little bit of a speed run back to work dev. I think about who were my educators on the practice of workforce development. I think about, I'll name check, David Fisher and Leah Hebert and Angie Kameth and David Garza and some folks who really taught me what this looks like. I'm curious over your journey if anyone stands out as sort of
all of those people.
Yeah.
For sure. Those are those are terrific New Yorkers, and nothing beats actually talking to someone who graduated from a program.
Yeah. Like a participant who
Like
came up.
those are the most compelling moments in my mind, because it defies what we were talking about earlier, that this is not transformative. It is transformative work, and everyone in this room should keep doing what they're doing with the full knowledge that, of course, you are transforming lives. And now the collective work is to continue to transform the systems that allow you to do that work with more ease and energy.
Yeah, that's awesome. By the way, Katie Galstigi was probably my PhD master's on that, so appreciate that. That's all the time we have. When we talk about public excellence, I just want to note, when we talk about New Yorkers who give to our civic infrastructure, your career and your tenure exemplifies it. So on behalf of all of us, thank you for your service. We hope to see you on a tour of duty again in public service, but please join me in thanking Maria Torres-Springer for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.